Hi, welcome to the Libertarian Alternative. My name is Mark Selzer. I'm your host today, and the Libertarian Alternative is an educational television show brought to your community by the Libertarian Party. Today on the show we have Congressman Bob Barr. Thank you very much for coming out.
Mark, great to be with you.
It's an honor to have you on the show. Now, the issue, of course, that you have been most concerned about, and I just saw you speaking on CNN regarding this issue, is the Patriot Act. Now, you have started you're now no longer a congressman, but you've started an organization to help educate people about the Patriot Act and what it's doing in America?
We have. This year, 2005, as you know, is particularly important to issues of privacy and civil liberties because the provisions that were sunsetted in the original Patriot Act, which was passed right after the attacks of 9/11, come up this year. Mm-hmm. And we all know one of the laws of the universe, one of Bob Barr's laws of the universe, is that Congress won't do something unless it's either wrong or it has to do it. Well, it has to deal with the USA Patriot Act this year. That's why we've been making a very concerted effort to, as you say, educate the American people as to the problematic provisions in the Patriot Act, why it's important for them to be involved and engaged in this issue, and to draw as much attention in the Congress to these issues as possible. And the vehicle that we have formed is called Patriots to Restore Checks and Balances. It's an umbrella organization in which the Libertarian Party is involved, the American Conservative Union is involved, the American Civil Liberties Union is involved, various Second Amendment organizations are involved, mm-hmm. medical organizations, a whole range of organizations that represent people and professions who care deeply about making sure that government doesn't take or get or subsume too much power in its war against acts of terrorism so that we undermine the very basis of freedom that we're supposed to be defending.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing how all these different organizations, liberal, conservative, are coming together because we're all basically Americans first and we all care about freedom. What steps have you taken? Have you introduced legislation? You're lobbying?
What we have done thus far is we've held a news conference. We have met with a lot of individual members of Congress. I have had the opportunity recently to testify before both the House and the Senate Judiciary Committees. We are endorsing a piece of legislation that has been introduced in both the House and the Senate, bipartisan, called the SAFE Act. This act will address not all of the concerns that we have with the Patriot Act, but at least some of them, and place some modest limitations on those powers so that even if we don't get all the way back to where we want to be under the Fourth Amendment, for example, at least we make some progress in getting back to that appropriate balance.
Now, a lot of the viewers are probably unfamiliar with the Patriot Act. Now, what are your concerns with the Patriot Act? What is the problem with it?
The overall problem with the Patriot Act is that it gives the government the power, which it has never really had before, to investigate people, to gather evidence against individuals without any suspicion whatsoever that those individuals have committed a criminal act, an act under federal criminal law, or are suspected of being engaged in either foreign espionage or terrorist activity. Mm-hmm. It used to be, of course, under the Fourth Amendment, which is the basic privacy amendment in the Constitution, it used to be that the government could not invade or pierce your sphere of privacy with which all of us are clothed without at least some good reason or a reasonable suspicion that you've done something wrong. Now, under this rubric of fighting terrorism, the Patriot Act gives the government the power to go to a doctor's office, for example, a library, a gun shop where you have lawfully and legitimately exercised your Second Amendment rights, for example, and gather evidence that it might want to use against you on no basis whatsoever, other than that the government is conducting some far-ranging, unspecified, vague effort to stop terrorism. That is too much power, too broad a grant of power for the federal government, so we're trying to rein that in a little bit, place some limitations on it.
And this could just be because of your religion or your some other affiliation. It could be because you have a Middle Eastern surname, something like that. I mean, really, in this, you're guilty until proven innocent seems to be the problem.
It is. It's a very insidious power because it allows the government to gather evidence on very private matters against you or on you, or to be used somehow against you without any suspicion whatsoever that you've done something wrong. And that is simply a power that cries out for abuse, and why we need to rein it in. There's another power, for example, that we're also seeking to place a reasonable limitation on, and that is the so-called sneak and peek power under the Patriot Act.
And what is this? This is really scary.
It is, and it simply means that the government is able to execute a search warrant against an individual to search their home or their office, seize evidence, or place something on their hard drive to record the use of their computer, and not tell the person about it. So you can come home from a day at work, or you can go to your office after an evening at home. The government has been there, they paid you a visit, you don't know about it, you don't know what they've taken.
Break into your house and put a bug on your computer.
So-called black bag operations.
Wow.
Now, we certainly recognize that there might be instances in a very serious criminal case involving terrorism or national security where the government would need to conduct that sort of operation and obtain the power not to notify the person for a period of time.
Right.
But the power that was granted to the government to conduct those sneak and peek searches in the Patriot Act is too broad. It gives the government the power, for example, in any criminal case to conduct a sneak and peek search warrant without any more of a showing than telling the court, gee, it would be more efficient to do it this way.
Wow.
And that's too broad a power. So we're asking for the Congress to rein that in a bit.
Now, this has a sunset clause
Some of the provisions do. Now, the sneak and peek doesn't. The sneak and peek is already a permanent fixture. But we're asking the Congress, by the way, while you are looking at these provisions that are sunsetted, such as the one that makes it easier for the government to get a court order to gather evidence against somebody, we think that this is serious enough that you need to address this at the same time.
Now, what about, let me play devil's advocate. I mean, the people that advocate the Patriot Act are going to say to you, well, look, we've been attacked on 9/11. Thousands of people died. Don't we need this to fight terrorism?
And we say to them, yes, there may be specific, unusual circumstances in which to fight terrorism, to stop an act of terrorism by gathering evidence to be used against those people to stop it, where the government needs to delay notification. We recognize that. We're not saying that the government shouldn't have that power. We're simply saying that the circumstances in which the government can obtain that extraordinary power to conduct a black bag search and seizure ought to be carefully limited and not available to the government simply because it finds it more convenient to do that.
Yeah, because we can wiretap people who we do have a large suspicion that they're criminals and are conducting some kind of criminal activity. We can already do that, but this is way too far.
And that's the essence of the problems in the Patriot Act. It isn't that the government should not have legitimate tools that it needs to gather evidence to protect our citizens, but what we ought not to do is say, okay, simply because you, the government, are saying you want to do this to fight terrorism, somehow the Bill of Rights doesn't apply. The Bill of Rights should always apply, and we should always be very, very skeptical of moves by the government to get so much power that it can use that power whenever it wants to.
Right, because why? I mean, a lot of people have said the terrorists are objecting to our freedom. This is one of the reasons they're attacking us. Well, why give up our freedoms? Because then they've won.
That is the essence of why it's so important for us to address these issues.
So now the Patriot Act is a this was voted in kind of in a little bit of hysteria after 9/11. That's how I would characterize it. Kind of, we were scared. We were worried about being attacked again or more in this kind of fashion, that there were more attacks on the way. And there was a rush to give the government more power.